All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Strikes Back. Today we have Courtney from Angel City FC. Do you mind telling us about yourself and about the club?
Sure. So I'm like you said, I'm Courtney Isaac, and so I work for Angel City FC as the director of partnership marketing. So I oversee our partnership activation for our corporate partners, which really means bringing to life all the things that we get to do with our corporate partners. So a little bit about the club. So we are the newest expansion team for the NWSL, the pro league here in the US. And so we'll be starting play spring of next year in 2022. So we have a bit of a runway, but yeah, we're set out to make a name for ourselves and also change the game for not just our team and our sport, but for women's sports as a whole. We believe we're built on something much larger than just soccer. And we have a really awesome backing from some great investors spanning from Natalie Portman to Julie Foudy and Mia Hamm, Alexis Ohanian and Serena Williams. So it's a pretty diverse group of folks that are backing and pumping us up, which is really fun. So we're just getting started, but we're excited for our first game in a little under a year now. So it'll be great.
So, did the club start kind of with the idea from like one woman and wanted to get the support of a bunch of women? How did that start up?
Yeah, so the club was founded through a few folks actually that were connected to the Me Too movement. And so the Me Too group that actually Natalie Portman had founded, she learned of the disparity in sports, specifically in the pay inequity, through Abby Wambach. She and her were a mutual friend. And so she was like, that's not okay. So let's make a team and change it. So that was the genesis of it. But yeah, the thought from the start has been this is more than soccer, and we're going to be affecting people, far beside the game.
Love that. It's definitely my new behind Portland Thorns, my new favorite team.
We'll change that. We're going to start beating up on the Thorns once we can take the field. If we want that number one spot in your heart.
All right. So then let's start with the first question. Why is female visibility so low in sport?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think goes really far back in time, if we're being honest with ourselves. Just traditionally how women were viewed, many years ago, even 50 years ago, not being able to own land and vote, and those inequities from the start of just what it meant to be a woman long ago, was far different than what women are seen doing now. So I think that's where it really stems from. It's just manifesting itself in a way that we're still seeing, unfortunately, kind of the traditional viewpoint that there's not visibility because it's viewed as less than or not as entertaining or strong or whatever the adjective is. But I think it just goes a lot further back in history, because it's such a traditional view of a role of gender roles or what have you. So I think that manifests itself in sports just kind of on this like continual basis because of that tradition.
So for something that's so, historical and systemic, um, what's the best way we can combat that? Single best way.
Yeah. I've said this, I think, over the last few months specifically, just in my circles and especially internally, it's money, like I think people are shy to talk about money at times, but to grow the women's game and to make it more visible, the best thing you can do is spend money with women. And that means for fans, right? Buying jerseys, buying tickets for the women's team, supporting them, retweeting them, right? At the same rate, if not more than what you do for men's sports. If you're a sponsor or a company or a business person, like you can spend money in the women's game and you'll see a return. You'll see those positive things for your business, but it takes investment on the front end. So that's, sponsors or taking your employees to a game or anything like that. And then certainly for media, making sure you're investing the money to promote, and obviously have the visibility as well. So I think like it's a funny thing because people tend to shy away from that, and they're still in the mindset that like, oh, you should be happy to be here as a women's team, or you should be happy to get what you're even getting now. But realistically, to combat this lack of visibility is you got to spend money. So I definitely think that's where where it'll change.
Yeah, I think that's where that ties in perfectly with like with Abby Wambach. She talks about in her book Wolfpack how she was receiving a reward for best athlete with Kobe Bryant and I believe Peyton Manning.
Mhm.
And she said that she had this sudden realization that when she was walking off the stage, they were walking into very different realities, and that she didn't even know she could pay off her mortgage. And I think that is the moment that like the depth of the inequality really hit me. And I think Angel City FC's kind of mission really aligns with what Abby is setting out to do, I think, and like what she, not just for herself, but for even the next generation of players, like starting from Alex Morgan all the way down to like youth players.
Yeah, no, totally. That example is so key because, right, they're on stage, they're celebrated in the same way alongside those people. And they, in that moment, acknowledge how, how talented she is and how far she'd come and, on the stage with those type of legends, and a legend herself. But yeah, behind the scenes, you see, the money wasn't there. It wasn't invested in the same clearly different experiences. And she's not the only one. There are so many female athletes that had that similar experience. But yeah, kind of like an empty celebration when you think about it, getting an award like that, but not really caring. So it's pretty wild to think about.
No, that being said, an argument I often hear against equal pay is that revenue equals pay. Um, so what's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is look at the NCAA example that's been swirling over the last few weeks or months here. Like, there's now clear data that shows the engagement levels, the viewership levels from the women's basketball tournament this past year exceeding the men's. And on top of that, the top 10, I think, followed and engaged athletes in the Final Four teams, 7 of 10, I believe, were women that were like higher followed and higher engaged. So I think that is the data finally that we have, because if you're never given the stage, if the women are never given the stage to get the rankings that are put on the major networks, you'll never know. So they've been comparing this investment level of really high for men and they're on major networks to being on, the streaming network or whatever it is. And of course, they're not going to be equal. Like if there's 10 steps to get to that game, of course, it's not going to be equal, just like a men's game if they were on that same stage. So finally, I think there's data saying that, like, look, we've never been given a shot. And now that we have in piecemeal form, like it's exceeding the men, if not just meeting them. So to that, it's like we've never given the shot to even make that argument. So like you have nothing to go on to say that, because you can look at the investment on the front end, and again, it's about that money to put them on the forefront. So the NCAA is a really good example. I think the previous World Cups, women's World Cups, are a good example too, just on the soccer side of where there is significant eyeballs, and then specifically the NWSL last year, the first league to really combat the COVID environment, and put on the Challenge Cup. And today actually starts the next iteration of the Challenge Cup for the NWSL, which is super exciting. But just incredible viewership numbers, from that type of style. And that's honestly why, they're doing it again this year, to keep that kind of environment and, a lot of games happening so people can engage really well with it. So yeah, it's just about giving them the shot, because you can't make that argument without the data yourself.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I recently learned the FA, which is the English Football League, banned women's soccer in 1921 because they were doing too well. And
Isn't
so,
that crazy?
when you look at that, you're like, how could you ever believe that like we were ever given an equal shot?
Exactly. And even, I mean, there were that article, I think, a month ago, that one of the men's coaches was like punished. A punishment was to go like coach the women. So that mindset is so telling of like the English game in general, which is, even more strapped in this tradition, and, the men reigning supreme because of just how they've been operating for so many years and such a long history. But that's the exact narrative that just, it can't live on anymore, you know? And they're getting, the FA is doing a great job of just growing the teams and the visibility there. I think individually by club, it's gotten a little better. But that growth makes our game stronger here and vice versa. So it's really about uplifting everyone.
Yeah. We're kind of talking more about the general scope of things, but I guess on a more personal level, when did you first personally like realize there was inequality in sport?
Yeah. I mean, it takes me back a little bit to, I played soccer all my life and in college as well. So I think I saw it as a player a lot, um, both in high school and in college, of just, some things being different for men's, or actually when like we would be like tasked, like there'd be like, homework, go watch this game, or coaches would say you should be watching this stuff. It was never watch the women. There was a women's World Cup during my college years. Um, and I think I remember the men's World Cup because they're usually back-to-back years, men's and then women. So I remember the men's year was like we watched every game and we talked about it. And when the women's tournament happened, like nothing was like planned or organized. And it's like no knock necessarily on the coaches or anyone else, but like even myself, like I wasn't as into it, And so that was like, I think my first realization of like the perception that also I was feeding into, just because you don't know what you don't know at times, but you're just grown up in this super male dominant, only sports ever for on TV were men's sports, So like there really wasn't even that opportunity, except for like one time. I think the women's national team had been on TV. But I think one of those World Cups when I was like in middle school was in Pacific, or in like China. I think it was like I'm forgetting my years, maybe '07. And so like the time change was like making it very impossible to even watch and consume it. So I think little things like that really matter. You're talking about like visibility and being able to watch, and get the viewership. But yeah, I think it was during my playing days, but kind of like around those big tournaments when I realized that we were really really about watching the men, but not so much around the women.
Yeah, I mean, you're here working for one of the most highly anticipated women's soccer clubs in the coming years, right? So I guess, did you have a striking moment that kind of sparked your way here? Um, yeah, like, did you have something that just really set off the fire for you?
I feel like it was a bit of a slow burn for me. I mean, being so connected to the women's game in different ways for all my life, um, it's been a constant, just as a player. And again, like my first job was actually at US Soccer, when I was done with grad school. So seeing soccer at a really high level early on in my career was really helpful, for kind of like my personal beliefs and certainly for my work and, what I wanted to do. So having that really high level view was really important. So I got to see a lot and understand the inner workings of just the holistic game. And then I was very fortunate enough to attend both the last Women's World Cups, in 2015. I went to a game, and in 2019, this past, well, a couple summers ago now, forget it's 21. So just like seeing those events and how different they were, even 4 years apart, and the growth that happened in there, I would say like for a lot of people, being and hearing about the 19 World Cup like was a big moment. And I do think that one set the trajectory for a lot of this growth we're seeing now. Because the reality is those tournaments are awesome, but they're really easy to rally around, right? You're supporting your country, they're every 4 years, but the real magic happens when you're affecting day in and day out fans and day in and day out players. So that's like where the real growth happens. So I really realized that the club space is where you can make a really big impact and making this long lasting, because I was also in college when, WUSA folded, the previous league before NWSL. And so I definitely, that might be the moment as I like talk in circles, like, because I remember being like, well, what the heck? Why did they even start this if it wasn't gonna pan out? And like how could this happen? Like I had no idea the inner workings of the business side. But I think that, I guess now that I see it was probably a big turning point, but knowing how important the women's game has always been in my life and personally playing the sport, has been a slow burn. It's probably a combination of those two things.
So, with all those experiences, kind of like the culmination of it all, um, I guess nowadays, what kind of fires you up when you talk about this? What keeps you going every day?
Yeah, honestly, that it's gonna change. Like even 3 years ago, I don't think I would have said that necessarily, or wouldn't have seen the pathway that it would be changing holistically. But it's just accelerated this growth. More people now than ever are talking about the game in the right way, talking about our athletes in the right manner, that they are athletes first. And that's enough to watch them because they're just badass women. So I think that there's like a true path for growth here. And we see now the ripple effects of expansion teams like us and like Louisville FC in our league. Certainly the WNBA and how they've grown over the last few years, still drowning in all their New Jersey reveals over the last couple of
Yeah.
days.
Oh my
So
gosh. So
so
cool.
cool, right? And I'm a Chicago kid at heart. So like the Chicago ones to me were just like off the wall amazing. So all of that like great chatter is awesome. I think the next step is like what I said, put your money where your mouth is, like support these women and support the teams that are putting them on, these platforms. That'll just skyrocket. The investment is there. There's now a path to get, businesses and people to invest in these sports. And it's going to be incredible. Like even in the next 8 months or a year when we take the field, like it's going to be accelerated for everybody. So even beyond that, it's bound to be even bigger. So I just think that's really hopeful and like a really cool, North Star to work towards.
Yeah, it sounds like this journey is almost like very personal to you, right? It starts from you watching game day tape or like having games to watch, and it's never the women's games, which no one really thinks anything of, which shows a problem in itself, right? And then you go to the league folding, and it's kind of like, oh, women's sports don't have a future. And now you're kind of here working with one of like the biggest clubs to come in the NWSL, and it's historic because it's backed by women, invested in by women. And so
Mhm.
it sounds like you're very much like personally invested in this journey. That must feel like, I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's super special. I mean, I'm so fortunate to be in this role, and it feels like a long time coming, and just a combination of my personal passions, my skill sets of working in sports business, and a real just commitment across the board for our whole organization, which, there's obviously teams and sports leagues and, other people that work in this industry that have a lot of passion for what they do, but it does feel different, even from other roles I've been in other companies. Like it just feels, to your point, personal, but like motivatingly personal, not like an attack necessarily. Like it's so positive, and yeah, it's just a really, really fortunate position to be in. I feel very lucky.
Love that. Love. It's good. It's going in a good direction, definitely.
Yeah, and for sure going to convert you to a fan, and you can put aside Portland gear.
I mean, okay, I'm not opposed to it. I'll say that.
That's going to be a fun matchup, I think, for future years, us
Oh,
against
so
Portland.
excited. So excited. All right, so let's get on to the speed round then.
Right.
Um, First one, what does United by Sport mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's all about sports affecting change. There's such a strength when people come together and uniting around a common goal, a common, just thought or emotion. And so for me, it's a very uplifting phrase that, through sport, it affects change because there's nothing stronger than a group of people coming together, for that common goal.
Perfect. And second, when you hear the phrase, no one fits in, everyone belongs, what's the first thing you think of?
I love that, phrase, by the way. It just like identity and being true to yourself. There's nothing, you don't want to fit people into a box or check, just check boxes about, people are fitting in, but it's really about being true to your identity because everyone can belong the way they are.
Yeah, that's exactly the mission behind it. Yeah, hit it on the nail. Sometimes
Yeah, so
those phrases feel so weird and like unnatural to me,
I
but
totally hear you. That's happened to me on multiple occasions.
I say it differently every time. I think like sometimes I say you hit it on the dot, which doesn't make sense.
Hit it on target. That sounds right. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll use that next time.
Tuck that one away.
Okay, well, we had so much fun having you on today. It was so lovely to hear, your insight and everything that you've gone through up to this point. And we're very thankful that you had time to come on. Do you have any last words you'd like to say?
Just thanks for having me, and happy to always share more about Angel City, and definitely be on the lookout for us in 2022 on the field, and give us a follow on social. A little selfless plug there. Give us a follow.
Oh yeah, do you want to drop the at?
Yeah, it's just at We Are Angel City across the board. So it's super easy.
There we go. Go follow everyone. All right, we will see you all next week.